Most people spend their lives chasing money without ever stopping to question why wealth seems to settle so naturally in the hands of some people while forever slipping through the fingers of others. They assume the difference is intelligence, privilege, luck, or hidden advantages. But history tells a different story, one that is far less glamorous and far more demanding. More than 3,000 years ago, long before modern banks, stock markets, or financial gurus, a king ruled whose name became inseparable from wisdom itself. King Solomon was not remembered simply because he was wealthy, but because he understood something timeless about how wealth is created, sustained, and destroyed. His insights were not tricks, formulas, or shortcuts. They were observations about human nature, discipline, and responsibility, and they remain painfully relevant in a world that still confuses money with meaning. The foundation of Solomon's thinking begins with a choice that reveals everything. When offered anything his heart desired, he did not ask for riches, power, or victory over enemies. He asked for understanding. That single request exposes a truth most people ignore. Wealth is not the starting point, it is the outcome. Solomon understood that money responds to wisdom, the way crops respond to fertile soil. Without the soil, seeds rot or are blown away. Wisdom in this sense is not abstract philosophy. It is the ability to judge accurately, to recognize patterns, and to act in alignment with reality rather than impulse. Money flows toward people who consistently make sound decisions, not toward those who merely desire it. In ancient Jewish thought, wisdom was never passive. It was active engagement with life. Questioning was encouraged, debate was respected, and blind acceptance was discouraged. Knowledge alone was not enough. Understanding had to be tested through action. This intellectual culture trained people to think critically about value, risk, and consequence. Someone raised to ask why naturally becomes someone who asks what happens next. That habit alone protects against countless financial mistakes. When people understand second-order consequences, they spend differently, invest differently, and negotiate differently. They are less likely to be seduced by appearances and more likely to recognize substance. Another pillar of this worldview is the relationship with time. Solomon observed that impatience destroys more wealth than ignorance. People want results immediately, and when they do not arrive, they abandon good strategies for bad ones that promise speed. Ancient wisdom repeatedly warns that wealth gained hastily diminishes, not because speed itself is evil, but because haste bypasses learning and discipline. Sustainable growth requires time to reveal what works and what does not. Those who respect time allow compounding to do its quiet work, while those who fight time exhaust themselves chasing constant acceleration. This long-term orientation reshapes how decisions are made. Instead of asking what feels good now, the wiser question becomes what will still matter years from now. Spending becomes intentional rather than emotional. Saving is no longer framed as deprivation, but as protection. Investment is not gambling, but participation in future value. This mindset naturally discourages recklessness. When people think generationally, they stop treating money as something to consume and start treating it as something to steward. Stewardship is a crucial concept often misunderstood. It does not mean hoarding or excessive caution. It means recognizing that resources carry responsibility. In Jewish tradition, wealth is morally neutral, but how it is earned and used is not. Money is a tool, and like any tool, it amplifies the character of the person holding it. In wise hands, it builds, supports, and sustains. In foolish hands, it destroys. This framing removes both shame and obsession from wealth. People are not taught to worship money, nor are they taught to fear it. They are taught to manage it with intention. This balanced relationship with money eliminates a psychological conflict that sabotages many people. When money is associated with guilt, people subconsciously sabotage their own success. When money is associated with identity, people cling to it desperately and make defensive decisions. Wisdom dissolves both extremes. Money becomes feedback, not validation. It reflects how well someone understands value, effort, and exchange. When people are free from emotional entanglement with money, they make clearer decisions and experience less stress even as responsibility grows. Charity and generosity play a central role in this framework, not as afterthoughts but as structural elements. Giving is not optional or symbolic. It is embedded into daily life and economic behavior. This practice keeps wealth circulating rather than stagnating. It reinforces social bonds and prevents isolation. More importantly, it reinforces humility. A person who gives regularly is reminded that wealth is not solely the product of personal brilliance, but also of opportunity, cooperation, and circumstance. This humility protects against arrogance, which Solomon repeatedly identified as a precursor to downfall. Another enduring insight is the emphasis on independence. Through skill and ownership, dependency was understood as vulnerability. To rely entirely on others for survival meant surrendering control over one's future. This is why skills were prized and trades were respected. Knowledge that could generate value was considered a form of security, more reliable than stored wealth alone. Skills adapt. Gold does not. A person who can create value is never truly poor, even if circumstances temporarily strip away resources. This emphasis on skill naturally led to business, trade, and entrepreneurship. Solomon himself oversaw extensive trade networks and alliances. Wealth was not generated in isolation, but through exchange. Trust became a form of capital. Reputation became an asset. Fair dealing reduced friction and expanded opportunity. When people knew they would be treated honestly, they were more willing to engage, invest, and collaborate. Over time, integrity proved more profitable than cleverness alone. Discipline underlies all of these principles. Solomon warned repeatedly against laziness, distraction, and impulsiveness. He observed that outcomes are shaped not by occasional brilliance but by consistent behavior. Small actions repeated daily produce far greater results than dramatic efforts applied sporadically. This idea runs counter to modern culture, which celebrates overnight success and viral moments. Ancient wisdom teaches that real progress often feels unimpressive in the moment. It is quiet, steady, and easy to underestimate until time reveals its power. Discipline also guards against emotional decision-making. Fear and greed are ancient forces that still drive markets and ruin individuals. A disciplined person does not react to every fluctuation. They understand that volatility is temporary, but habits are permanent. By anchoring decisions in principle rather than emotion, they reduce regret and increase predictability. This does not eliminate risk, but it ensures that risk is chosen consciously rather than stumbled into blindly. Underlying all of this is a deep respect for reality. Solomon's wisdom was observational, not idealistic. He studied human behavior honestly, acknowledging weakness without condemnation. He recognized that envy distorts judgment, that pride invites collapse, and that comparison breeds dissatisfaction. These observations are especially relevant to money. Many financial mistakes are not caused by lack of information, but by emotional pressure to keep up, impress, or feel superior. Wisdom cuts through these illusions and redirects focus toward what actually works. Humility emerges as a quiet but powerful theme. A humble person learns faster because they listen. They adapt quicker because they accept feedback. They avoid catastrophic mistakes because they recognize limits. In financial terms, humility prevents overconfidence, excessive leverage, and stubborn attachment to failing strategies. It allows for correction before damage becomes irreversible. Wealth built on humility grows steadily, even if it does not attract attention. As these ideas integrate, wealth becomes a process rather than an event. It is not something achieved once and secured forever, but something maintained through ongoing alignment between values and behavior. This process is resilient because it does not depend on specific conditions. It survives market crashes, technological change, and social upheaval because it is rooted in human behavior rather than external structures. Identity itself begins to shift. A person grounded in wisdom does not define themselves by income or possessions. Their sense of stability comes from competence, judgment, and adaptability. This internal security changes how risk is perceived. Risk becomes something to evaluate calmly rather than fear or chase impulsively. Wise risk is informed, limited, and intentional. Foolish risk is driven by ego or desperation. The difference between the two determines whether risk leads to growth or ruin. Resilience becomes a natural byproduct. Solomon wrote extensively about impermanence. He observed that circumstances change, fortunes rise and fall, and nothing remains static. Rather than resisting this truth, wisdom embraces it. Acceptance of impermanence encourages flexibility. A flexible person adjusts strategies without abandoning principles. They do not cling to outdated methods simply because they once worked. This adaptability is essential in business and finance, where rigidity often proves fatal. This worldview also reshapes ambition. Instead of chasing constant escalation, wise ambition seeks balance and sufficiency. The goal is not endless accumulation, but stability, contribution, and continuity. This protects against burnout and destructive greed. It allows enjoyment without excess and progress without self-destruction. Wealth becomes a means to support a well-lived life rather than a substitute for one. Relationships deepen under this framework. Trust compounds. People are drawn to those who are steady, fair, and thoughtful. Opportunities arise not through self-promotion, but through reliability. Influence grows organically. This kind of social capital cannot be purchased. It is earned slowly through consistent behavior. Over time, it becomes one of the most valuable assets a person can possess. Family plays a crucial role in preserving these principles. Wealth is not passed down only through assets, but through attitudes. Children absorb how money is discussed, handled, and respected. They learn whether decisions are made thoughtfully or emotionally, whether generosity is practiced or merely praised, whether planning is valued or ignored. These early lessons shape financial behavior far more deeply than later instruction. Education in this context never ends. Curiosity is maintained throughout life. Learning is not confined to formal settings. This openness prevents stagnation and keeps judgment sharp. Markets evolve, technologies shift, and opportunities appear in new forms. A mind trained to learn adapts naturally. Certainty becomes dangerous. Curiosity becomes protective. As years pass, the compounding effect of these choices becomes undeniable, not only financially but emotionally and socially. Life feels more coherent. Decisions align with values. Less energy is wasted on regret or justification. Clarity replaces chaos. Simplicity replaces excess. This internal order supports external success in ways that are difficult to measure but impossible to ignore. The enduring power of Solomon's wisdom lies in its universality. It does not depend on a specific culture, religion, or era. It describes how humans behave under pressure, incentive, and uncertainty. It explains why some people remain stable, while others oscillate wildly. It reveals that wealth is less about circumstances and more about structure. True success, then, is not a snapshot of possessions, but a trajectory of alignment. It is measured over decades, not moments. It values continuity over spectacle. This is why these principles have endured. While countless financial systems have failed, they are rooted in human nature, not economic fashion. The greatest misconception about wealth is that it begins with money. In reality, it begins with perception, with how one understands effort, delay, responsibility, and meaning. Change the lens and outcomes change naturally, without force, without desperation, without illusion. In the end, the true legacy of Solomon is not gold or monuments, but a way of seeing the world. A way that transforms chaos into order, effort into progress, and time into an ally rather than an enemy. When this wisdom is lived, wealth no longer needs to be chased. It is built deliberately, patiently, and meaningfully, one clear decision at a time.